Today we are talking about why 90% of B2B content is a big failure and what to do instead. Welcome to the B2B Playbook. We built this channel for small B2B marketing teams who want to drive more revenue for their business. Every week, we're showing you how to create more demand for your brand step by step using our 5Bs framework. So if you're time poor, resource strapped, but you still want to make a big impact on your business, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below so you don't miss an episode. Welcome back to the B2B Playbook. Today we are talking about why 90% of B2B content is a big failure and what to do instead. We are into season 7 of the show. We spent seasons 1 to 5 giving away our 5Bs framework for demand generation, releasing it step by step. Season 6, we answered a lot of FAQs on building and implementing demand generation engines. And now we're going to continue building on that by looking at how it fits into your wider go-to-market strategy. Kevin, for those who have not been with us before or those who have and have forgotten, can you please tell them what our 5Bs framework is all about?
Of course, George. The 5Bs framework starts with be ready, which means deeply understanding your dream customers. Then we move on to talking about be helpful, which is about developing relationships of trust with them, particularly online. Then in Be Seen, we talk about how to amplify those relationships of trust and how to focus in on your specific dream customers and niches that you want to go after. In Be Better, we then talk about how to optimize that whole B2B marketing process that you've built up until that point. And finally, in Be the Best, we talk about some of the advanced strategies and tactics that the guys at the bigger end of town use, how you can apply those to your own B2B marketing, and how you can use this 5Bs framework to build a flywheel for your business.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kevin. And again, listeners and viewers, today we're talking about why 90% of B2B content fails and what to do instead. Now, most B2B marketers out there are creating content for content's sake, Kev. At least that's what I see out there when I'm browsing through LinkedIn, when we're working with clients, when people come to us for the B2B Incubator, they're told to really, add value. They're told to build awareness, but no one tells them towards what. And as a result, you have content that might get some engagement, it might drive some clicks to your website, but it's not really connected enough to the business and what you do for it to really make an impact. Because, people might consume that information, but you're not being remembered for the right reasons. And so today we're going to again talk about why 90% of B2B content fails. We're going to show you how to fix it by anchoring your content to your unique point of view. We're going to share our 3-question point of view exercise from the B2B Incubator, and we're also going to show you how to make your product or service the logical conclusion of your content so it's really nicely connected. Well, let's kick into, again, why, Kevin, 90% of B2B content fails. I mean, what is your take on this? Why do you think it fails so badly?
Well, George, I know we have a few reasons in mind that we'll talk to in a second, but the first one that comes to mind today is a lot of marketers in-house are put under pressure, particularly if they're looking after the acquisition part, which they generally are, particularly in startup businesses and scaling businesses. They're told to run ads, do whatever you need to get the leads in. So one of the most common things that they end up on is content. It's free. It's an easy way to get those leads in. So you try and churn out as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And because of that time crunch, because of that pressure to generate leads, to generate new business, often you don't get the chance to do the legwork or give yourself the room to do the legwork to make sure that content hits home. You're just doing content for content's sake, as George said earlier. And then the other aspect is that you're under pressure to make ads work. And a lot of times when you get down to it, ads will really work when the creative is right, when the content you're pushing to is actually relevant and resonates with the people that you're getting in from your ads. So that's another pressure area to try and get your content right. But again, time crunch, revenue growth crunch. So that means a lot more pressure is put on getting that volume rather than getting the quality and the angle of that content right.
And maybe that comes, Kevin, from often marketers suffer from this issue of everyone in the business thinks they know how to do marketing. Everyone always has an opinion on marketing. Like everyone has written something, right? I mean, we're forced to do it throughout school. So if your leadership keeps hearing content, we need to do content, well, then that pressure gets forced on you as the marketer. And you might just be in this constant reactive mode. As you said, Kevin, you don't actually get the opportunity to think about, okay, we said content, but what's the end goal? What do we need to do here? Do we have some frameworks that can guide us so the content actually has a positive impact? So when someone is ready to buy, they think of us for the right reasons. And I think that's where so much of maybe that content for content's sake goes missing. And maybe, Kevin, also because of how we might be measured as marketers too. If we are trying to drive more traffic to our website, for example, you might create content and try and rank for certain key terms that, get a lot of exposure and a lot of people talking, well, not a lot of people talking about you, but a lot of people seeing that thing because it talks to a really broad audience. But how is it actually connected to what you're doing? Kev, I've actually thought about this for us as well. There's a huge amount more search volume for lead generation than there is for demand generation. Part of me thought, Kev, do we just make a short, great video about lead generation to hook people into our channel? But that's not really what we do. It's not really what we talk about. Are we going against our framework if we do that? What do you think?
Well, George, I think, again, you come back to strategy. Right? What is our strategy? Our strategy is to focus in on the 5Bs framework. It's to talk about how we can build a sustainable B2B marketing engine. Part of that might include lead gen, but it's not the focus. And so that really isn't the focus of our strategy. It might have a place. We might have that succinct piece of content about lead gen, but it will always be in the context of the 5Bs framework, and maybe why we think it's not the end goal at the end of the day. We talk about lead gen actually a lot on the podcast and in our content. We say why it shouldn't be the goal. It shouldn't be the strategy behind your business, particularly in B2B, particularly when you're going after growth, because at some point, sooner rather than later these days, you're probably going to die on that hill of lead gen. It's probably going to be a bit rough because you're going to run out of leads to go after at a reasonable cost. And that's maybe a little too late to go after demand generation. So I think when we talk about a strategy, when we come back to the 5Bs framework, which is what we're really talking about here, then lead gen has a place in defining what you shouldn't do in certain circumstances and how it compares to demand gen. And that's how we talk about lead gen altogether. Again, it might be a subtle difference when it comes to practice. Do we actually have pieces of content about lead gen? Sure, there might be comparisons, but really that content is then driven by quite clear strategy, and it fits within our framework and it fits into our content pillars and what it ultimately drives towards. So I think in that context, yeah, we should do some, but maybe not in exactly the guise that you talked about there.
So Kevin, if we were to make a video around top 10 lead generation strategies for 2026, maybe there's something we could do, but then towards the end, start to go, yes, these are all wonderful things and it will generate leads for your business, but what is the point of that? Why are we even doing it? Is this a sustainable way for you to go to market for your business? Do sales like these leads? And then we can start to tie it to our unique point of view. So maybe that's a way of accessing and tapping into a larger audience, but still making sure it's connected to our unique point of view.
Yeah, certainly. And we might be talking about it in the context of saying these are all great. That's the top 10, but that's the top 10 strategies to reach 5% of your market. What about the other 95%? Maybe this should only be 3 to 5% of your efforts as well, because correspondingly, there's 95% of the market who's not ready to buy from you within the next month, but might be from 2 months onwards. And you probably want to spend most of your energy on that crowd. And in that case, we're not chasing that trend for the trend's sake. We're not chasing the awareness metrics and the engagement metrics for the sake of them. We're actually trying to educate that market towards demand generation, towards our 5Bs framework, and ultimately how to be sustainable in your B2B marketing, which is our ultimate strategy behind our content.
So then every piece of content you do should tie towards your point of view or really advocate for that point of view, right, Kev? And I think if you do that, then it will more naturally flow to make your product or service the logical conclusion of what you're talking about. And I think that's something we try and do here on the B2B Playbook, right? Is we come in, we share our 5Bs framework. That's our unique point of view on really what marketing should be and what a good go-to-market strategy should be. And we go into detail about it. We reframe it and talk about it at the top of every single episode. And we've done that for over 200 episodes now. And Once we do that and tie it to that, the logical conclusion is, and guess what? If you need some more structure and clarity around executing this in your business, well, we've got a few options for you. We've got our agency, that's a more hands-on way of doing it with you, and our incubator, which is a way that you can upskill to learn how to champion this internally at your organization and be the hero that you deserve to be. So it becomes the natural conclusion. But if Kevin and I just started every episode trying to sell you the kitchen sink with what we do, then you probably wouldn't trust us. And what are we even really selling you that's different to other people out there? So we do, as much as possible, try and have a unique point of view, and naturally that should extend into your product or service as the logical conclusion. We are not out there, Kevin, sharing really the latest AI hack for marketing, are we? It just doesn't make sense for us to do that.
No, we're not. We do talk about obviously AI and how it impacts our workflows and everything, but only where it's relevant for especially those small B2B marketing teams that are trying to do a lot of things with very little resource. Obviously, AI is a great tool to have in the box, but again, it's just that one tool in the box, and there's plenty of other things you can focus on. As George said, the core principle here is that your content really should make your product a logical conclusion. The only caveat is not every content or piece of content needs to exist to prove your exact point of view. Your product is the only solution to everything, and that you need to take commercial action off the back of it after reading this piece of content. We did talk about that you can create content to solve other problems or ancillary problems for your audience. And so for your customers, for your potential customers, if you're solving an ancillary problem that's maybe not directly related to the products that you have, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because again, it builds that trust. It still ties into that strategy that we talk about, because it's still building that brand reputation into your business so that they will trust you when they see that piece of content that actually does talk about your point of view and why. If you hold that point of view, if you hold that belief, the natural commercial reaction when the time is right is to purchase or work with that particular business. So in that context, that's probably the only caveat we have of when a piece of content exists not only to prove your point of view, but that's probably the only caveat that comes to mind.
Even then, Kev, that caveat, I would say, when we talk about solving an ancillary problem, it's still normally tied back to their jobs to be done as well. So what is the actual job of that person who's the key champion for your product or service? What things do they need to get done right now that you can help them with? That still does in some way, shape, or form sort of tie to what you might help them with later on. Easy example would be what HubSpot did with a lot of their certifications, helping people upskill in their jobs, like to make more out of their own content or CRMs or whatever it is that HubSpot helps you with. That is a great thing for a marketer to be able to upskill in, to do better, to do like their content better, which might be part of their job. And then guess what? When you're coming to evaluating your current CRM, HubSpot is, of course, going to be on your list because they've directly helped you. It still is somewhat tied to, I think, Kevin, what it is that they really solve for that customer too. So we don't want to do content for content's sake. Try and connect it if you can back to your solution. Should we go through the point of view exercise, Kevin, that we actually normally use in our B2B incubator and share it with people?
Yeah, definitely, George. So now that you kind of understood why 90% of B2B content fails and why you should try and fix or anchor your content to your point of view, let's talk about the point of view exercise on how to practically make that happen. Your point of view really gives depth to your messaging. It frames you as a strategic partner or advisor rather than just a vendor or another option in the market. And we tend to use the following three-part formula to define it. So the first one is the question, what belief or assumptions do you challenge? For example, the marketing's primary job is to generate MQLs for sales. That's something we fundamentally challenge with our 5Bs framework. We really think marketing should own a lot more than that, should be accountable for revenue, and should build a sustainable system to generate that revenue in the long term. That includes working closely and aligning with the sales team, not just to pass on MQLs. What is the definition of an MQL? Does sales actually find any value from these MQLs? And is it ultimately helping your business to grow? And those are the sort of questions we'd rather want you to challenge with the 5Bs framework and the B2B podcast and the B2B playbook. So that is an example of how you should define the belief or assumption that you want to challenge. And then the second part, we want to say, okay, that's what you want to challenge. What is a new belief or insight that you want to promote instead? And again, in the B2B Playbooks example, the belief that we want to promote is that marketing should shape demand by earning trust early and supporting the full buying journey and ultimately be accountable for revenue and growth in the business. We shouldn't just go after vanity metrics. So providing that sort of clear belief and insight into what you want to promote and keeping that top of mind when you come to building your content, that is really going to help. And finally, part 3 is, why does this even matter to your ICP right now? Because that might all be well and good, but if it's not relevant to your ICP, they don't really care. And particularly, there's a time element to this. So for example, in the B2B Playbook case, often what we see as a category entry point is that there's a lot of small teams in marketing. They really can't afford to waste resources chasing leads that won't convert, and they're starting to get, or they have suffered a lot of the pain that comes with that, where they're chasing MQLs, the sales team are on them for pushing across poor quality MQLs, the leadership team are on them for not having a sense of trust in what they're doing and viewing them just as the make it pretty department, or is really putting a lot of pressure to drive those MQLs that the sales are not happy with. So those are the kind of things that could be potential category entry points for us on the B2B Playbook. And generally it stems from the fact that there's a small marketing team, maybe even one person, who really can't afford to waste any resources, and they're already struggling with the workload as is.
And once you've done that, Kevin, and you've formed your unique point of view, make sure you write it down. Make sure that the team agrees with it as well. What we'd like to do from there is take that unique point of view and create like messaging across the 5 stages of awareness from there. So what are the key messages that we want to put based on where people are at in their buying journey? And of course, we don't know exactly where people are at in their buying journey, but we know based on how people buy, based on questions they ask our sales team, that there's certain thoughts and questions and moments that they have when they go from being unaware that they need you to being led to the logical conclusion that you are the perfect vendor for them. And what do you need to say to them at each stage so you can keep consistently communicating your unique point of view? Now, I think, Kevin, most of your content should probably sit in that problem-aware and solution-aware stages, because they're the moments where your strategic ideas have the most impact. If they're already looking like sort of at that product aware, well, then your unique point of view probably doesn't quite matter as much because they're further along in their journey. But if you get them earlier in their journey, that's where you want to think, okay, their worldview reflects my reality. So once I come into market, you are the right fit for me. I would choose you because you have resonated with me from the beginning. And I think that's what we really need to do once we shape our unique point of view. We take that, feed that into the 5 stages of awareness, map out the questions people ask, write the key message to communicate at each stage as well. 2 beautiful frameworks. They work really, really nicely together. And hopefully, Kev, at that stage, you've got a really, really nice framework that tells you what you need to communicate with every single piece of content. And it will inherently lead to your product or service being the logical conclusion, which is what we want.
Well, there you go, listeners. That is how you take your point of view, form that, and then make sure that your solution is the natural next step at the end of your content. Key takeaways for this episode. First, don't create content just to be seen. Create it to shift belief. Then your point of view is the foundation. It connects your content to commercial outcomes. So every post, video, or article should lead your buyer to think, hey, if I agree with this, then their product makes total sense for me. And if it doesn't, then it's just noise.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you, Kevin. And now, listeners and viewers, if you do want to learn how to really define your point of view and build a very deeply connected content system that helps drive pipeline, that fuels the business, that's of course what we teach inside the B2B Incubator. We have cohorts running quarterly. There's a mixture of live sessions or on-demand sessions, or if you just want to do the on-demand part, you can also do that. We give you frameworks, templates, and support to really turn your content from just random activity into a strategic growth engine. So if you're interested in that, search the B2B Incubator and we should be the first result there. Again, very clear example, Kevin, of us turning something that our listeners and viewers care about into a plug for our business. I don't think we're burning trust with them. I think they trust us anyway. We're giving enough value up front. And if you want to take that extra step, we are there to help you. As always, you can find links to everything we discussed in the show notes. Kevin and I are so grateful that every week more and more marketers are tuning in every Monday, and Kevin, salespeople too. We are having more and more salespeople tuning in, which is wonderful as well. And if we could ask one thing, it would be to please pass the show on to someone who you think you get value from it. It's a huge help to us. Check us out on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, all that beautiful stuff. Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, viewers. Catch you then.
Thank you, George. Thank you, viewers and listeners. Catch you all next week.